I have made an active effort and I have chosen to try to show up as my most authentic self. And I've chosen to just work on me and learn to love me. It has taken years and years of trial and error and experiences to realize that who I am outside of accolades or relationships or validation, that like I'm enough by myself. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of 2 Decades Deep, where we explore the nuances of our 20s. I'm your host, Taylor Howard, and I'm so happy you're here. Shoot, Happy New Year, everyone. I mean, it's 100% February, but I haven't had an episode since last year. And it's been a while since I chatted with you all, so I just wanted to say Happy New Year officially from me. What are some of y'all's goals? Like, drop in the comments if you all have any goals or New Year's resolutions, or if you all made vision boards for this year. I'd love to know what you all are doing this year. For me, I'll say I didn't write goals per se, but I do have 2 words of the year. I have gratitude is one of my words, and then abundance. I feel like last year was kind of tough. I mean, I've talked a little bit about what my year looked like last year. And so I really just want to like be in the state of gratitude that one, it could always be worse, but two, a lot of good things happen in my life on the day to day. So I really want to walk in that. Another thing with abundance is I feel like because last year was so hard, because I became more disciplined, because I laid the foundation, I am speaking and manifesting that I will have a year of abundance. And so that's a little bit about like what my goals are, but I'd love to know what y'all are working on and whether or not you're tuning in on YouTube, Spotify, or now we're on Apple Podcast. I'm so happy that you all are here and you're consuming it in a way that is convenient for you. By the time that you watch this episode or listen to this episode, I will officially have moved back to Chicago. If you didn't tune in, on my last solo episode, I talked about how I was transitioning from DC back to Chicago, and I'm really excited. I literally leave today. So I'm filming this on January 26th, and by the time it comes out, I would have been in Chicago for about a couple weeks now. So I'm super excited. I'm super emotional. I'm in my feels, but this is not what the episode is about today. We're not talking about me moving. That is for another time if I even do an episode on moving, because it's like that's all I've been talking about for the solo episode. I talk about me moving. It's like, girl, we get it. Um, but today we're actually talking about self-love, and it is Love Month, February. And when we hear love and romance, I think we think about platonic friendships. Obviously, we think about romantic relationships, but I really want to focus on the self, our self love, our self worth, our self acceptance. And I think that's something that I personally have struggled with is really loving and accepting who I am to its core. But before we go into the nitty gritty, I wanted to open the episode with a Valentine's Day throwback. So I don't know, was this college? Yes, this was college. No, 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 no. Was it college? No, 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 it was high school? It was between middle school and high school. I don't remember. But we used to be able to purchase like, like the telegrams. And every year people would get telegrams from their significant others, from their crushes or whatever. I ain't never get one. I ain't never get one. So the year, I think it was like after 2 years of not getting it in a row, I got myself one. And y'all played the role, like, when it got delivered to my class, so they would get delivered in your classes, I was like, "Oh my god, who's this from?" And it was 100% from me. But I think that was my first act of self-love was affirming myself. I wrote myself a little love note, and I got myself something that made me feel good. And even though I was capping and made it seem like it was from someone else, I think that was my first introduction to self-love. So I have some notes here. I'm gonna have my laptop with me because I think it's important to establish like what self-love actually is. And I looked up some definitions because I think self-love could be misinterpreted for a few different things. I think sometimes it could be self-love could be confused for self-indulgence or selfishness, right? And so the definition that I liked a lot was self-love is about nurturing your well-being, honoring your needs, and fostering a deep sense of respect and care for yourself. It's rooted in long-term growth and health. And so when I think about that, I think of laboring with yourself, being open to the journey and the process of finding yourself and falling in love with yourself. And so some examples of that could be prioritizing rest when you're tired, setting healthy boundaries in relationships, eating a balanced diet that fuels your body, practicing mindfulness, or seeking therapy for personal growth. Now, I think that it can be confused sometimes, and while they're a little aligned, for self-indulgence. And so this definition of self-indulgence is focusing on immediate gratification or temporary pleasure without considering long-term consequences. And so examples of that could be binge watching TV instead of addressing pressing responsibilities, overspending on things you don't need to feel monetary happiness or monetary, momentary happiness, overeating unhealthy food regularly, ignoring how it affects your health. And so I don't think self-indulgence is always bad. I think sometimes it's good for us to escape. Like when I have bad work days, or even sometimes when I have bad podcast days, I do need to escape and read a book, or I will get my pick me up and I will get a crumble cookie that is 743 billion calories. And I think sometimes you do need that, but self-indulgence focuses on temporary joy and self-love focuses on the long term. And lastly, selfishness, like I know we hear this narrative of like be selfish, like be more selfish with your time. I don't think that's the word people are actually trying to trying to communicate because selfishness, when I think of selfishness, it's without consideration of anybody else. And I don't think we're always trying to do that. I think we're just trying to prioritize ourselves versus not considering other people. I also think that when you're being selfish, you're just not pleasant. And I don't think anybody really likes a selfish person. And I think you ultimately don't like being a selfish person either. And so I'm not, when I think about self love, I'm not referring to those two terms that can be misunderstood. Some things when I think about with self love, like I said earlier, it's something that I'm still working on. Self love is really challenging. And not only do I feel like self love takes effort and a lot of work, and we already manage a lot of things. Like, for example, I work, I have to manage, the podcast stuff. And then I want to work out, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do that. And then there's only so many hours in the day. So it's like, how do I even put that in? Or sometimes self-love just takes so much time that you're like, forget it. Like, I'm not about to do all that because I have so much to do. Which brings me to my first point. I think self-love can be really hard because of a lot of external factors. And one of them is this hustle culture, especially if you live in America. There's a rat race culture, instant gratification culture, where we have this assumption that things are supposed to happen easily. And we are going to only be ourselves for the rest of our lives. And so, with that comes time, evolution, things that are going on in our lives that we expect or not expect. We get hella curveballs in our lives. And so, with this instant gratification mindset and this hustle culture mindset of like, grind, don't sleep, you'll sleep when you're dead, all that stuff, it really does play into how you view self-love. Like, I am about to like, I've had so many times where it's like, I'm not about to rest. All this stuff I have to do. But then I realized later, it's like, dang, I'm really burned out. And it's because I didn't take the rest that I needed and I didn't listen to my body. And then I end up shutting down anyway. Another thing is like culture stigmas that we face. I think a lot, especially when you're a minority, self love or taking time for yourself can sometimes be viewed as a bad thing. Like, I will speak for, like, a lot of my friends can relate to this where there's an expectation to put others always before yourself and to take care of yourself last because people need you. And I also think that when it comes to cultural stigmas, many cultures like emphasize self-sacrifice, duty, and collective well-being over individual needs. And so I think that that really plays into why people can struggle so much with prioritizing themselves. The one I struggle with the most personally is like capitalism and consumerism. Whether I see an ad on social media or whatever, or even a commercial talking about like, oh, do you have a hyperpigmentation? Or is your tooth, I had a gap, like, oh, do you have a gap in your tooth? You can fix it with braces or Invisalign, or it's a quick fix. All you have to do is just buy this. And so it kind of feeds into this whole like, okay, once I purchase this or once I get that, then I will be my ideal self. Or, yeah, I just experienced that a lot. And I think that it's not only impacting me financially, but it also impacts how I view myself. And lastly, I think beauty standards and we all recognize or not, depending on where you live in the world, that beauty standards can be very subjective and we know that. But I do think that whether it's celebrities or it's someone that you admire in your day-to-day life, there is like an ideal, universally attractive look. And it can feed into your self-worth. And it's hard because it's like, you're like, okay, well, how does self-love sometimes directly correlates to appearance. And we just live in a world where we're judged, unfortunately, by how we look. And so it's kind of hard to separate the two, at least in my opinions. And so I think those are some things that I recognize off the bat that can be factors or hindering factors as to why or why not someone can accept themselves fully and really embrace self love. Okay, now that we know why self-love is so hard, I think we could talk about, like, ways that we can cultivate more of self-love. And so the first thing, and these are all things that I have done or I'm currently working on, but the one thing that I feel like I try to do the most is a mindset shift and practicing self-compassion. And I try to remind myself, and my therapist has told me this, of, like, talk to yourself like you would be talking to your friend. I can be so hard on myself and some of my friends are like, "Oh my gosh, like, Taylor, calm down." I can say the meanest things to myself, like, I could mess up something very simple. I remember one time I was going on a work trip and I forgot my clapboard. It's the thing that you clap when you are trying to sync audio, and it's a it's just a mistake, like, people make mistakes. I was like, "I'm such an idiot, and, like, I'm not responsible," doing way too much. Like, I know I was doing too much, but that I can be so negative to myself, or even sometimes when I slack in the gym, or I'm not really working out as much as I wish, or I was eating bad for a week, and I'm just like, "Dang, like, you'll never get to your goals because, like, you're not disciplined enough." And so, one thing that really helped me is one, I think I just had to accept that, like, I'm not perfect, and I know that's easier said than done, but I really do struggle for I can struggle, not as much anymore, but I'm always constantly battling perfectionism, and so I think just accepting the fact that, like, "Girl, you're not perfect, you're literally gonna make mistakes, you're literally gonna have setbacks, but ultimately, like, you'll always recover, you'll always bounce back." And so one book that I'm currently reading is, I think it's called How You Talk to Yourself, or How You Should Talk to Yourself. I'll drop it in the link, as a resource, but it really teaches you how big of a deal it is when you negative self-talk. It literally can make or break success. It can make or break your mental health. Like, it is so important to filter your thoughts and to not allow thoughts to hold so much weight, and your emotions as well. Like, I can feel really disappointed, I can feel really down, and there is a balance of, like, disappointment, these feelings that are coming up from you, sadness maybe, where you're not where you need to be, or you're upset with yourself. Like, you should feel your emotions, but not to the point where you just accept that, "Okay, if I keep making mistakes, like, I'm a loser." Like, it's really important to ensure that you are, like, putting a limit to that. Like, what is it called? Counterpartmentalizing. I never know how to say the word. I haven't been able to say the word since it was introduced to me in therapy. But you can hold space for certain emotions, but also realizing that your feelings aren't always facts and your thoughts aren't always valid or real. Things come up all the time, but you have to actively make an effort to combat those thoughts and replace it with affirmations. I have affirmations, and one of my favorite ones that has really helped me is that I trust that I can make decisions that are good for me. I really struggled with making decisions or being confident in my decision making. And so with that affirmation, like, I always bring that up, like, when I have to make a difficult decision or even a simple decision, and I just have noticed that I've become a more confident person because I speak things over my life. So I think affirmations and mindset shifts are huge. Another one is daily habits, like setting boundaries and prioritizing your needs. I told you all that I my word of the year is gratitude, and so I have a gratitude journal. I'll also put that in the link, and I start that with just a moment of thankfulness of what I do have. I think when I used to wake up, I would instantly go on social media, or I would wake up like, "Oh, I have so much to do today." And replacing that with, what am I thankful for? What do I have? What is allotted to me has really helped. I don't always do it. I'm not gonna lie, but I do think when I start my days with gratitude, with the gratitude journal, it helps. Also prioritizing my needs. Like, I have a routine. I know that when I first wake up, I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna get in my Bible. I'm gonna do my makeup because those are things that make me happy, and those are the ways I can prioritize myself. Another thing with setting boundaries is like can be really difficult for me. One thing I do is, like, after a certain hour, I shut off my phone and I'm not accessible to anybody. My job requires so much people interaction and sometimes I can feel drained. And so after a certain hour, I think it's like 8 or 9 p.m., I shut it off. I'm done communicating with people. My mom and Ryan and my sister Ryan, they know it well. I'd be like, "Oh, it's 8 p.m. I'll let you go." And they make jokes about it, but it really does help me refuel. Another thing is, like, self-care practices, taking time for activities that you enjoy and emphasizing rest, movement, and nourishing your body. So, one activity that I do that brings me so much joy is walking. I love going on long walks, and I don't really like walking on the treadmill, but when I was in DC, I would literally take 3, 4, 5-mile walks. I would get my favorite boba, and I would listen to, whether it was a podcast episode or just my favorite music, I just loved it. It was my favorite thing. I also, like, love getting my nails and feet done. So those are, like, some things that I really find joy in. And then also, emphasizing rest, movement, and nourishing my body. So eating healthy foods help me. Getting rest. I'm not that good at getting rest, but I read this book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry one time. I'll also I'm just dropping resources on resources. So Imma also put that in the link, and it emphasizes the point of, like, Sabbathing or taking a day or a certain period of time. So whether you only have, like, 4 hours or 5 hours, depending on, like, if you have kids or not, or, whatever priorities that you have, taking allotted time to just rest. And that doesn't mean, like, only watching TV, but actually, like, spending time to refuel. So taking a bath or whatever that looks like for you. And then also building self-trust, keeping promises to yourself and celebrating small wins. That is probably might be one of my favorite points that I just listed. Building self-trust. I told you all, like, the affirmation. I trust that I can make decisions that are good for myself. When I started this podcast, it's just the most recent example. or even moving across the country. I was like, this is something that I'm going to do. This is something that I want to do for myself. And I did it. And even when things got hard, even when things got difficult, even when I was like spiraling sometimes, I was like, no, girl, you are going to do this. And then going back to the celebrating small wins, sometimes I'll get myself a pick me up. It's like, okay, I can get that cookie, or I can take myself out to dinner, or I can get that glass of wine. Something that I also try to do is when I'm really proud of something, I try to tell someone, I'm like, hey, like, I'm really happy that I did this for myself because like I said earlier, I can be so down on myself that it's hard for me to acknowledge when things are going well or when I do or when I am proud of something that I did. So I try to tell like a close friend. And a lot of times they're like, okay, well, we got to celebrate this. Or it just helps you feel good about like the things that you're doing. When it comes to building self trust, I think that can come a lot with like self worth and how you feel about yourself. Because I think building self trust is also knowing that the things that you're doing for yourself are gonna ultimately have a better outcome whether or not you actually want to do that. I'll give you an example. When I was in college, I was in a situationship with let me call him the frat boy. And I was in a situationship with him, and he was cool, he was funny, he was popular. Um, I enjoyed being with him because he was really spontaneous, and sometimes I can act like there's a stick up my butt, and I'm sometimes a little rigid. So I have a lot of appreciation for people, or I'm attracted to people who are kind of the opposite of me. And so I remember when I got into a situationship with him, I noticed that like I don't feel good about how I'm being treated. And for example, like he wasn't, and this was a situationship, right? He's not my boyfriend, right? But to the fact is, he wouldn't make me his girlfriend. And so there were times where we would make plans and then he would cancel. Or there were times where I remember one time he left his laptop out and I was a little nutty. I like searched his like text messages with my friend actually. Like we were at the library, he went to the bathroom, and me and my other friend, Leah, hey girly, we went through his laptop while he was gone, and we found out that like he asked me to hang out, I couldn't, and then he literally had like a list of other girls that he was gonna hang out with because I wasn't available. And he would treat me so poorly when I, like, didn't do everything that he wanted him to do, everything that he wanted me to do. If I wasn't available to him, I just found myself, like, kind of undignifying myself, honestly, and just being super accessible, super available, despite not liking it. But I just wanted companionship and to be loved so bad. And I didn't have a lot of self-respect in the sense that I thought how I was viewed, like how he viewed me was more important than how I viewed myself. And so I was striving to be perfect. I was trying to do everything for him and trying to be everything to him in a situationship. He didn't even ask me to be his girlfriend, and I was doing the most. And so I remember feeling like, why do I not want to give this up? And I think that there was a lack of trust that I actually can be okay by myself. I've been by myself before, and trusting that there will be something better for me. And so I think I was just so upset about the possibility of what it would look like to not be in communication with him that I just accepted it. There was one time, uh, I'm just airing my whole this one time I went to his class, like, I met him after class, and I was like, "Hey, so I really was talking myself up, like, you got to address some stuff to him." So I walk up to his class, I'm like, "Hey, so are you talking to other girls? Because you told me that you were only talking to me, and I found out that you're talking to other girls. Like, what's today?" He's like, "Yeah, I am talking to other girls." I was like, Okay, cool. Because he was like, okay, and like I'm talking to other girls, like you ain't my girl, which is true. I'm technically not his girl, but we all know situationships, you'll be feeling like you are really locked in. And that's another story for another day about like what I feel about situationships. I don't think they can be really messy. And so I was just like, oh, okay, cool. And then that lost I lost a lack of trust that I can be assertive and I can actually stand on business. And so finally, as at my 27-year-old self, I can do that. And there was times where like I would date someone and I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm cutting this off. It's not for me." Or even outside of like a romantic relationship, just like I said before, doing the podcast, moving across the country or making little decisions or elevating in certain ways or reaching certain milestones. You trust yourself there and build confidence there. And so that is probably the thing that I try to exercise more is to like build trust and celebrating that when I finally cut that relationship off or the situationship off, I got into another situationship. So I really didn't learn the immediate lesson from that. But I think after Loki getting my butt kicked in relationships and accepting less than I deserve, I then realized it. But I was young. So I'm not gonna go on myself too much, but I think that's just another example of like trust. So I do also want to talk about like with self-love and with you finding yourself and growing. I think there is a balance of isolation, not isolation, solitude. I don't like the word isolation. Isolation, um, I think solitude is the better word just because there are times where you do need to sit with yourself and accept where you are, accept how you feel all the feels, feel your emotions. But I also think that self-love can be also help you can build more self-love through community and encouraging yourself to be around people who uplift you, who make you happy, who speak life into you, who pour into you. And I found a lot of that through my church community. I would feel a way or I would be experiencing something and they'll be like, okay, well, what does the Bible say? Or what does God say about you? Or I don't experience you that way. And so that really helped me realize, like, okay, a lot of this is me. It's not true. Like, it's just my own self doubt. I also think that people who respect your boundaries and people who respect you as you are, I think, and accepting you as you are, but also calling you higher. And I think my ships, that's another word for like sorority sisters or line sisters. We use it in the Midwest, and I think they're a really good example of that. We are almost 8 years in the game now. We're old heads almost at this point, and they're a really good example of they've seen a lot of different versions of me, from 20-year-old me to almost 28-year-old me, and they've seen me in different steps of my life, and they've accepted who I am. They've listened to me vent, they've been my shoulders to cry on, they've encouraged me, but they're also like, "Okay, girl, but let's snap out of it." Like, I'll give you a real example. I was crying about my finances last year, and I vented to my ship Tamara, and I was like, "Dude, like, I'm really struggling." And she was like, "I feel you. I've been there. I'm not gonna hold you though. There are some things you could do to lock in on your finances." And I felt that. I was like, she heard me, she validated me, she sympathized with me, but then she also called me higher. I was like, okay, but now that we know, let's get it together. Um, and so that's just an example of the community that you keep can also pour into you. I even think about therapy, having someone that can listen to that and also give you really practical tools of how to manage that and how to accept yourself fully. So with that, I know that I do think that it's not just like, "Oh, it's a quick fix. All you gotta do is the steps that I listed and blah, 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 and you're gonna obtain self-love." I think it's literally a never-ending journey. You're gonna have setbacks, like I said, and self-doubt is part of the process. It's really hard to exist. It's hard to exist. It's hard to bet on yourself every day. It's hard to choose to accept who you are fully and truly. It's hard to accept that, oh, I'm actually bad at this, or I actually lack in this area. I even as simple as like a couple days ago, my friends came over and I was like, "Y'all, please excuse the mess. It's a little messy." And one of them was like, "Girl, it's always messy." And I think that just goes to show, like, okay, I'm a little messy sometimes. Like, that may or may not ever change. And I remember I used to overly try to, like, fix that about myself. Some things are just gonna be what it is. And, so just accepting sometimes that things are just gonna be what it is. Keep calling yourself higher. I just wanna share that it is a never-ending journey. It's something I'm constantly working on and reworking. What worked for me 2 years ago may not work for me now and may not work for me in 2 years to come. And so constantly just checking in with yourself and seeing what you need in specific moments. One thing I want you all to do is drop in the comments or DM us on our social media accounts and just tell us, like, what is one thing you could do to show yourself self-love? What is one thing that you can do to make yourself feel good and something that you can practice for the weeks, the months, the years to come? One thing that I'm going to try to do is just be present. I have been in the process of moving. Oh my God. I can't wait till this, like, I'm in the process of moving. I'm moving. I'm moving. That is like something I always talk about. But in the process of moving, I've just been on the go, go, go. I've also in a field where I'm always on the go. And the podcast requires me to be always on the go. So I'm really going to try to detach. And when I'm not doing things that are associated with work or the podcast, that I just want to be there and enjoy where I'm at and not think about all the to-dos that I have to do and just like immerse myself in wherever I'm at. I think that's going to be the main thing I want to do. In closing, mindset shifts, daily habits, building self-trust, and self-care practices are things that you all can do to obtain self-love or working towards self-love. I haven't cracked the code to self-love, but I do think that I have made an active effort and I have chosen to try to show up as my most authentic self. And I've chosen to just work on me and learn to love me. It has taken years and years of trial and error and experiences to realize that who I am outside of accolades or relationships or validation, that like I'm enough by myself. One thing about me is I'm a fan of women. Like if I see a woman doing well on social media, I'm like their biggest fan. In sports, I'm obsessed with women's sports. I will repost, celebrate, be so proud of all these women. On the day to day with my ships, with my friend groups, with my girlfriends, I am like their biggest supporters. I will show up for them. I will go through labor hard things with them. If they are venting, if they're going through a hard time, I am the first one there getting on the phone with them. And I journaled one time and I was like, if I could put even a quarter of the energy I put into my other relationships with myself, man, my cup would run over with myself. I would have so much love and appreciation for myself. And so my challenge is the way you treat others, give that back to yourself. And the energy and the effort and the laboring that you do for other people and the highs and the lows that you endure with other people, do it with yourself. I also feel like my faith does play a huge role into self-love. I recognize that, like, I'm a Christian and I serve a God of love. And there's a Bible verse that says that God made us in his image and likeness. And so I dwell on that scripture a lot because it teaches me like I was made and I was designed in the way that God wanted me to be. And God makes no mistakes. So I'm not a mistake. There are things that I have to work on. I'm imperfect. but God did not make a mistake when he made me. There was no fault in making me. And so if God can love me so much, then I am lovable. I have to be lovable, right? And so I think I we have these I have these practical things that I do for myself and things that I think I should work on. I have these practical steps, but I ultimately always go back to I'm created in the image and likeness of God. And so if he can accept me, I need to accept myself too. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you all so much. Whether you listened in or whether you watch, I love y'all. Zion. And as always, we are uncovering who we are one chapter at a time, and we're unfolding at our own pace, and we're exactly where we need to be. I love you, and it is my hope that you continue to practice self love. Take care.